So Herbie was moaning last time I did a video because my eyes were like that instead of at the camera. I mean, it's a different angle, so it was probably whatever. But I've got a teleprompter because I've got scripts, and I do this instead of just a voiceover. So now I'm just putting sunglasses on, which makes me look like an idiot and a bit of an arse. But I think my childhood was a bit of a weird one because I always loved the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory movie. No, not that one. Not Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yes, exactly. Now, I didn't really grow up reading the Roald Dahl books, as I didn't have any of them at home. You know, I did read the Twits, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, and Matilda at primary school, but I didn't have them at home, and I haven't read any of them for years. But I do remember my favourite Roald Dahl book was always The Great Glass Elevator. I did quite like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I liked both the movies, but it always confused me that they never made The Great Glass Elevator as a movie. So now I'm making a YouTube video about all the adaptations about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and all that history, because why not? The Charlie and the Chocolate Factory book was released in 1964. It was written by British author Roald Dahl, and it features a young Charlie Bucket having a big adventure inside a chocolate factory owned by the eccentric Willy Wonka, while competing against a bunch of other children to win a lifetime supply of chocolate. But you already know this, probably. The story was originally inspired by Roald Dahl's experience when he was a child of chocolate companies sending test packages to school children in exchange for their opinions about the new products. At that time, around the 1920s, Cadbury and Rowntree's were the largest chocolate makers in England, and they would often try to steal each other's secrets by sending spies to the other's factory, inspiring the recipe-thieving spies depicted within the book. Because of the spies, both companies became highly protective of their chocolate making processes. The secrecy and the elaborate gigantic machines within the factories inspired Dahl to write the story. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory to this day is frequently ranked amongst the most popular works in children's literature, and has inspired sequels and adaptations, and a candy brand. From 1971 to 2018, the Willy Wonka Candy Company, later known as the Nestle Candy Shop, operated. This brand of confectionery was owned and licensed by the Swiss company Nestle, and was given the Wonka name in exchange for $3 million to finance the 1971 film. The brand was launched on May 17, 1971, 1 month before the release of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, on June 30th, 1971. The original Wonka bars weren't seen on store shelves until after the film's release due to a factory problem, but subsequent Wonka product releases were highly successful, including the Everlasting Gobstopper in 1976, Nerds in 1983, and in 2017, the Willy Wonka brand was dropped by Nestle, and they renamed the brand to the Nestle Candy Shop. The business was later discontinued in 2018, and the individual brands were sold off to the Ferrera Candy Company. As stated previously, on June 30th, 1971, Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was released. Now, this film is a musical film adaptation of the 1964 novel, directed by Mel Stewart and starring Gene Wilder as Willy Wonka. The filming took place in Munich in 1970, and although there were lots of trouble filming it, it was released in 1971. While the film received positive reviews, it was a box office disappointment. However, it did get an Academy Award nomination for the Best Original Score, and it eventually gained a cult following due to its repeated television airings and home video sales. Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator is the sequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the book was published in 1972 in the United States and 1973 within the UK. Although Charlie and the Chocolate Factory has had several screen and stage adaptations, The Great Glass Elevator has never been adapted into a visual media apart from a play in 1984. It was also adapted for audio alongside the first book Puffin audiobooks and a separate BBC adaptation for Radio 4 in 1983. There was a follow-up book planned called Charlie in the White House, where Charlie's family and Mr. Wonka were invited to the White House to have dinner with the president, in thanks for saving the world from the spacecraft during the Great Glass Elevator. Sadly, Roald Dahl only wrote the first chapter, which is currently on display at the Roald Dahl Museum and Story Centre in the Great Step. In 1984, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, based on the book by Roald Dahl, was dramatised by Richard R. George. It isn't a very well-known play, but when I was looking it up, it turns out that there's no live stream rights, but it's £90 per performance, which is actually pretty good. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is a 1985 video game developed by British studio Soft Option and published by Hill McGibbon. It is loosely based on the original 1964 book, and on release, consumers had the option of buying the game and the book as a set, or buying the game on its own. The game includes 4 different single-screen games based on the characters from the book. A 5th game, an arcade adventure, is also playable. In the first of 4 games, the player must guide Augustus Gloop around a maze. In the second game, Violet Beauregard is being attacked by blueberries and must deflect them into a juicing machine. In the third game, Veruca Salt is being attacked by squirrels after enraging them, and she must leave behind the poisonous nuts as a defense. And in the fourth game, Mike TV travels across multiple floors trying to collect Wonka bars, while also avoiding cameras that attack with a shrinking ray. The arcade adventure takes place in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, as you're playing as Charlie. The player must traverse the chocolate factory in search of 6 gold keys, which will allow the player to enter the Great Glass Glyph and win the game. The player must complete each of the 4 games in order to win the arcade adventure, but the game is still playable within a practice mode before completing the other games. However, the golden keys are absent from the arcade adventure game in practice mode, which means you can't complete it. On release, the graphics were criticised by reviewers who called them outdated and flickery, and most were disappointed with the game. In 2004, Roald Dahl's Willy Wonka was first seen. Now, this is a musical that combines the elements of both the original book and the 1971 movie, with some newly created material in between. Now, this musical has several versions, the original of which premiered in 2004, with a junior version, a kids version, a theatre for young audiences version, which are all owned by Music Theatre International, the company that owns the Willy Wonka licence. In 2005, Tim Burton released his Charlie and the Chocolate Factory adaptation, which starred Freddie Highmore as Charlie Bucket and Johnny Depp as Willy Wonka. This film had been in development hell for many years, starting in 1991. Prior to Burton's involvement, directors such as Gary Ross, Rob Minkoff, Martin Scorsese and Tom Shadyac had been involved, while Warner Bros. Either considered or discussed the role of Willy Wonka with Nicolas Cage, Jim Carrey, Michael Keaton, Brad Pitt, Will Smith and Adam Sandler. When he joined the project, Burton immediately brought on regular collaborators Johnny Depp and Danny Elfman, and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was the first time since Nightmare Before Christmas that Elfman contributed to a film score using his vocals. Filming took place from June to December 2004. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was released to critical praise and box office success, though was later looked down upon by fans as the lesser of the 2 film adaptations. As many big films did at the time, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory had a tie-in video game, released in 2005 for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, GameCube, Game Boy Advance and Microsoft Windows platforms. The game was released on the same day as the film's theatrical release in the US, and most of the main cast from the film provided their voice for the game, except Johnny Depp, and James Taylor Arnold was used in his place. I actually own a version of the PS2 version of the game, and let me say, in the entire time that I've had it, it has never actually been playable. In 2006, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory The Ride was opened in the Cloud Cuckoo Land area of Alton Towers theme park in England. It was based upon the original Roald Dahl book, and it takes thematic inspiration from the illustrations of Quentin Blake. The ride was split into 2 segments, the first being the boat ride along the Chocolate River, where passengers encountered all the characters from the books, either with simple animatronics or CGI projections. After disembarking the boats, the second segment began, with a short show video involving Mike TV. The video was presented as if the viewers were actually trapped within the TV set, and the ride continued inside one of the 2 Great Glass elevators, which simulated passengers taking an airborne trip throughout the rest of the factory. The attraction was closed at the end of 2015, with the building and associated boat ride being rethemed into the Alton Towers dungeon, which reopened in 2019. Various theming objects from the ride were put on sale at an auction in February 2019 to raise money for Merlin's Magic Wand. In 2010, Estate of Roald Dahl sanctioned an operatic adaptation called The Golden Ticket, written by Peter Rash and Donald Surrock. The Golden Ticket has completely original music and was commissioned by the American Lyric Theatre. Its world premiere was at the Opera Theatre of St. Louis on the 13th of June 2010, and it received pretty good reviews. In 2013, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory opened at the West End Theatre Royale. Now, this is the musical that most people will be aware of, as one of the songs became quite big on TikTok a year or so back. The show originally opened in the West End, directed by Sam Mendes, before later moving to Broadway. The show had new songs by Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman, and the West End run broke records for weekly ticket sales, and coincidentally, Douglas Hodge, who originated the role of Willy Wonka within the production, also voiced the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory audiobook. And that takes us on to today. Now, of course, you might know that there are more projects on the way. For example, at some point in 2023, we'll be getting a prequel film called Wonka, showing his adventures prior to opening the world's most famous chocolate factory, with Timothée Chalamet cast as a young Willy Wonka, with Paul King directing and David Heyman producing. And at the time of recording, the trailer dropped like 2 weeks ago, people talked about it for a day, and everyone forgot about it. There's also a currently unnamed television series that was announced on November 27th, 2018 by Netflix, who said that they were developing an animated series based on Roald Dahl's books, which would include Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and The Great Glass Elevator, which I'm really happy about, as The Great Glass Elevator was always my favourite Roald Dahl book, as we've already established. Now, the TV series is apparently being led by Taika Waititi, but since we've heard nothing about it for nearly 5 years, you might as well assume that it's probably never going to happen. So yeah, that's it. That's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. That's all the ones I could find. If you know of any more, please put in the comments. If you enjoyed, please put in the comments. If you think I should keep the sunglasses on, so you don't have to look at my eyes doing that, then say if you'd prefer them without. Say, I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing, guys. Seriously, like. Alright, see ya, bye.